Morning light filtered through the long white curtains of the Halbert Hotel's banquet hall, casting a soft glow on the crystal glasses and silver cutlery. The breakfast event for Bennett Global's inner circle of investors began at 8 a.m., true to Cyrus Bennett's style, precise, discreet, and uncompromising. He sat at the center table, clad in a charcoal gray suit with a dark navy tie, one hand adjusting his collar as his sharp gaze swept the room. The quiet murmurs, polite laughter, and delicate clinking of cutlery created the signature symphony of an elite gathering. Beside him, Elise Monroe, his fiancée in name, and Bennett Global's director of communications, was conversing with a Japanese investor. Cyrus paid little attention. His eyes rested on the glass of orange juice placed in front of him a few minutes ago, an attentive gesture, but not something he had ordered. Oddly enough, Cyrus despised orange juice. He hated its artificial, sweet and sour flavor. He picked up the glass not to drink, but to swirl the golden liquid gently, narrowing his eyes. "Don't drink that." The voice came neither loud nor urgent, but sharp enough to cut through the refined air like a blade. Cyrus tilted his head. The speaker was a woman in a dark blue janitor's uniform, her hair neatly tied back, gloved hands holding a damp rag. She stood by a large column near the buffet table, as if she just happened to be passing by. "What did you say?" Cyrus asked, his voice calm as if responding to a weather report. "There's something in it," she replied without meeting his gaze, her tone low enough that only he could hear. "That's not regular orange juice. If you trust me, put the glass down. If not, drink it and see for yourself." Then she turned away. Cyrus set the glass on the table. He was a cautious man, one who'd been betrayed before by those closest to him. The woman's seemingly absurd warning gave him a chill far more than it confused him. He motioned to his personal assistant, Daniel. "Take this glass away. Now." An hour later, after the event ended and the investors had departed, Cyrus sat in a temporary office on the hotel's 9th floor, staring at his tablet screen. The report from an independent lab had just arrived. Findings: low concentration of scopolamine, a sedative known for inducing short-term memory loss and mild behavioral control. Risk: high if the subject has never been exposed. Effects begin within 15 to 30 minutes. Cyrus leaned back in his chair, his palm slowly curling into a fist. He wasn't surprised the drink was tainted. What surprised him was that someone had warned him without asking for anything in return. That evening, Cyrus returned to the service floor and requested to meet the cleaning staff. The department head, Linda, pointed to a list. This morning's shift had 4 cleaners for the lobby, 2 men, 1 older gentleman, and, a girl we just hired last week. Name's Nora Reyes. "I want to see her." Linda frowned. "She left early, didn't leave a reason, but I have her internal extension." Cyrus took the hastily scribbled number. He dialed no answer, but as he walked toward the maintenance area, he heard a faint sound, the soft swish of a mop sliding across tiles. And there she was, Nora, mopping the hallway. No sign of surprise, no attempt to flee, just calm eyes and steady hands. "Why did you do it?" Cyrus asked. Nora paused, didn't answer right away. Her gaze lingered on the scuff mark from his leather shoes. "You're important," she said, her tone as neutral as if reading a washing machine manual. "Someone like you dying over a glass of juice. That's just an ugly way to go." She added, "I just hate ugly deaths." "Who are you?" Cyrus asked, narrowing his eyes. "A janitor," she replied, bending down to scrub the stain, "but also someone who once stopped a death by orange juice. Today was the 2nd time." He stood there for a few seconds, unsure whether to feel cautious, grateful, or deeply unsettled. A woman with no notable traits, no status, no record, and no reason to save him, yet she showed up at the perfect moment, as if pre-programmed. "You should know," Cyrus spoke slowly. "I don't trust anyone who does good things without wanting something in return." "Then think I'm crazy," Nora shrugged. "At least you're still alive." That night, Cyrus couldn't sleep. He called Daniel. "Investigate Nora Reyes, immediately. She's not normal." Daniel paused. "We couldn't find a matching record. No official documents. No driver's license. no tax ID. She basically doesn't exist in the system. Then who hired her? The record shows she was brought in by a third-party cleaning agency. Shift-based contract. She's hiding something, Cyrus said, certain now. Daniel nodded. But if she wanted to harm you, she wouldn't have warned you. And maybe she's the one being hunted. Cyrus folded his arms. Under the dim light, his eyes shimmered with something between suspicion and curiosity, a gaze not reserved for janitors, but for mysteries without answers. Who was the woman who saved him, and how did she know everything in advance? Impossible. Cyrus Bennett stared at the thin folder on his desk inside his private office on the 42nd floor of Bennett Global's headquarters. Across from him sat Daniel, his most trusted assistant, wearing an uneasy expression. We checked every database, federal archives, Social Security. There's no one named Nora Reyes born in the last 40 years who matches her appearance, fingerprints, or administrative records. No driver's license? None. No health insurance? None. No educational background? Nothing at all. Cyrus leaned back in his chair, fingers laced beneath his chin. He wasn't unfamiliar with people living off the grid, but this case was too clean, too deliberate. Then why is she working as a janitor? Daniel shrugged. The cleaning company hired her 8 months ago through a referral, an anonymous one, apparently. She have a criminal record? No criminal history. So, Cyrus sighed, then let out a soft chuckle. She's a ghost? Daniel shook his head. Not a ghost, but definitely not ordinary. You're watching Soul Stories, where every story whispers of love, healing, and hope. Let us know which city you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe and be a part of our journey. Now stay with us. The story is just beginning. That afternoon, Cyrus returned to the Halberd Hotel. No longer in his corporate suit, he wore a white dress shirt and light gray slacks, just another hotel guest. He made his way down to the maintenance level and found the janitor's supply room. The steel door was ajar. Inside, under the dim flicker of a fluorescent bulb, stood shelves of mops, buckets, cleaning supplies, and a wooden chair where Nora sat, bent over tying her shoelace. She didn't flinch when she saw him. Still alive? She asked without looking up. Still conscious, Cyrus replied, stepping in, and curious. Nora stood, brushing off her hands. Shouldn't you be busy running an empire? What brings you to a basement like this? You know who I am? I clean floors. I'm not blind. Cyrus smiled. Then let me ask you straight. Who are you? Nora looked up. For the first time, Cyrus saw her eyes clearly deep, composed but carrying something long since shattered. I used to be someone else. I had a real name, records, ID photos, she said. Then one day all of it was erased. Not because I committed a crime, because I spoke the truth in a system built on lies. Cyrus narrowed his eyes. More specific? Not your business. You saved me. Because I saw you were about to poison yourself. That's all. Have you ever worked in security? Cyrus probed. Your observation skills, the way you talk, doesn't feel like a janitor. Nora gave a faint laugh. You'd be surprised how many people with advanced degrees end up starting over from the bottom. So it's true then? What is? You were cast out by the system. Nora didn't answer. She stepped over to a plastic shelf, pulled out a bottle of bleach, then turned to him. People like me don't exist in your world, and if we do, we're stains an organization wants to scrub away. I'm not here for pity, I just want a quiet life. But you weren't quiet that day, because you were about to drink poison. And if I hadn't been a CEO, what if I were just a random guest? Nora set the bottle down. She looked at him for a long moment, then said, I would have still spoken up. I don't rank people by their titles. I rank them by whether they deserve to be saved. And that morning, you still seemed salvageable. Cyrus stayed silent. He wasn't used to being seen through, especially by someone who wanted nothing in return for such piercing honesty. Are you planning to leave? He asked. Nora raised an eyebrow. Leave where? The hotel, the city. I investigated you and others might do the same. Nora smiled. It wasn't a sad smile or a pleased one, just the expression of someone who had lived too long in the dark to still be afraid of it. If they find me, so be it. Maybe this time they'll miss. Cyrus stiffened. You've been targeted before? No, Nora tilted her head. But I've come close to not surviving, for speaking the truth. By the time Cyrus stepped out of the maintenance room, twilight had fallen. He called Daniel. I want to know how a woman with no record, no identity, knew there was something in my drink. What do you want me to do? Start 5 years back. Look into lawsuits or internal investigations involving whistleblowers, especially women in the security or justice sector. That might take time. I've got time, Cyrus replied, then paused. And this time, I'm not doing it for the company. I'm doing it for a warning that saved me without asking for anything in return. Cyrus Bennett's penthouse on Park Avenue overlooked Central Park, where the late autumn trees were blazing gold. But his mind wasn't on the Manhattan skyline, it was on the diamond ring Elise Monroe was holding in front of him. This is a custom De Vries design, made specifically for our engagement announcement, she said, her tone gentle. But her eyes held that familiar pressure, too polished, too strategic. She was someone who had mastered the art of controlling a narrative. We need to make the official announcement next Thursday. Modern Legacy magazine already reserved the cover. Cyrus leaned against the armrest of the chair, his eyes cold. I never agreed to this. Cyrus! Elise reached for his hand, her touch soft like affection, but he knew better. She had never loved him. Announcing the engagement will restore confidence from the board, especially after you refuse to reinvest in Juno Labs. People are asking questions. So marriage is your way of silencing rumors? It's how we reinforce the brand. I've given 6 years to Bennett Global's media presence for Cyrus. I'm not asking for much. Just stand next to me. He didn't answer. Elise withdrew her hand and smiled with perfect calm, the kind of smile that made his skin crawl. It wasn't real, just like everything else about her. That evening, Cyrus stayed late at the office. He opened his laptop and accessed the company's highest-level internal investment system. Something odd caught his attention. A $12 million allocation had been approved for a creative partnership fund with his digital signature attached. Problem was he'd never signed it. He zoomed in on the e-signature. It was his, but on closer inspection, it showed evidence of being accessed from an unfamiliar IP address, one tied to the company's PR department, where Elise worked. Cyrus began tracing the pattern. Over the past 3 months, at least 5 major documents had been altered, all dealing with investments, transfers, or financial control, and all signed under his name. He sat in silence for hours, his desk flooded with printed documents under the dim light. Something was deeply wrong, not just misuse of power. This was a calculated, deliberate operation. 1 week later, Elise walked into Cyrus's office wearing a wine-red dress, makeup flawless, and a rehearsed smile in place. The shoot starts at 11 a.m. tomorrow at the Halberd, she said. Then we'll have an exclusive interview. I already booked a stylist for you. You don't have to worry about a thing. Cyrus said nothing. He looked at her the way one might admire a finely carved statue, flawless, but lifeless. Elise, he said slowly, what if I cancel tomorrow? I'll smile and find another way, she replied, winking. You know me, I never let a closed door stay shut. That night, Cyrus summoned Daniel to his home. On the oak table were copies of all the compromised files. Daniel flipped through them, eyes tense. You think Elise forged your signature? He asked. Not just that. She's manipulating the ownership structure subtly, gradually. No one's noticed. She's staging a takeover? No, Daniel, Cyrus replied, eyes sharp as a blade. She's planning to replace me. Daniel froze. And the engagement? A facade, Cyrus said softly. If I'm accused of financial misconduct, shareholders would turn to her as a clean replacement. If I stay quiet, she gets legitimized as my partner and gains executive power. The next morning, Elise stood before the mirror, adjusting her hair. Cyrus watched from behind, silent. He wore a light gray suit, white shirt, no tie. There was something different in his eyes, but Elise didn't notice. She was too used to being in control, too confident that Cyrus Bennett was just another pawn. You okay? she asked. Cyrus nodded. Just tired. After today, everything will change. We'll be New York's power couple. We, Cyrus echoed. Or just you? Elise gave a soft laugh, saying nothing. The photo shoot never happened. Moments before the engagement announcement, Cyrus disappeared from the Halberd, leaving Elise alone with the production crew. Hours later, Elise received a call from Daniel. Miss Monroe, the legal office has requested your presence on the 42nd floor to clarify a number of documents related to digital signatures. Your personal attorney has been contacted. Sitting in a quiet cafe in Brooklyn, a cup of espresso before him, and a thick file labeled, Case, Reyes, Nora, Internal investigation 5 years ago. Subject of silencing attempt. At the bottom was a list of individuals involved in expelling her from the industry. One name stood out, a member of Bennett Global's board of directors. From the attempted poisoning, to Nora's erased records, to Elise's quiet power grab, none of it was random. It wasn't just scattered pieces anymore. It was a web, and Cyrus had been at the center of it far longer than he ever realized. The next day, Cyrus appeared in the lobby of the Halberd Hotel unannounced. He was dressed more casually than usual. Unbuttoned blazer, soft brown leather shoes, and his tie slung loosely over one shoulder, as if he'd just walked out of a long meeting. He passed the front desk without stopping, turning down a side hallway where the supply rooms, electrical panels, and gray walls resided. A place the wealthy rarely noticed, let alone entered. At the far end of the hallway, he saw her, Nora Reyes. She was dusting a stainless steel shelf near the equipment closet, still in her faded uniform, hair tied up, back slightly hunched in that familiar way of those who clean in silence. Good afternoon, Cyrus said, stopping a few steps away. Lose your wallet? Nora didn't turn. Or just looking for your memory? No, I was just passing by. He gave a faint smile. Coincidence? Right. Like the orange juice was a coincidence. He didn't answer. She didn't look at him either. But a few seconds later, Nora turned. Their eyes met, not with hostility, not quite curiosity either. It felt like they knew each other from some nameless place where trust wasn't freely given and silence meant more than words ever could. You don't seem like the type who gets lost, Nora said. I'm not lost, I just needed air. Cyrus stepped a little closer. I wanted to talk. We already talked. Not enough. Nora folded her arms. About what? About people who know too much, yet live like they know nothing, he said. You fall into that category, don't you? Nora didn't deny it, but something flickered in her eyes as if he had touched a part of her she kept buried. And you? She shot back. Are you the kind who trusts too fast, or the kind who controls everything until you trap yourself? Both, Cyrus exhaled, strangely honest. I trusted the wrong people. Then I tried to control everything. And in the end, no one stayed. Nora studied him for a long moment. I don't trust easily, he said. Good, she nodded. I'm not someone worth trusting easily anyway. Silence settled. Only the faint hum of a distant vacuum and flickering fluorescent lights filled the corridor. In that enclosed space, they stood like strangers, but with an invisible bond. Not tied by status, but by scars that hadn't healed. Someone erased you from the world, didn't they? Cyrus asked quietly. Nora looked up. Yes, but I chose not to come back. Why? Because coming back meant submitting to the same system that destroyed me. I chose to stay outside and stay small. But you didn't stay small that day, he said. You saved me. I didn't save you. Nora shook her head. I stopped someone from dying for trusting the wrong person. I've seen that happen before. To who? Her lips pressed together, her eyes darkened, voice dropping lower. To a former partner. He died after discovering forged files in a financial case. I spoke out, but they called me unstable, suspended me. And him, he died in a car accident. No cameras, no witnesses. Cyrus froze. Not because of the story, but because it fit. Perfectly. Like a missing puzzle piece sliding into place. Someone on the inside. Forged signatures, manipulated authority, covered truths wrapped in polished lies. And this time, the next target might be him. Who did you use to investigate for? He asked. Doesn't matter, Nora said, avoiding his gaze. I don't investigate anymore. I clean. Less blood involved. But you still observe. Because I can't stop. Cyrus rested his hand on the edge of the metal shelf. Someone's manipulating my system, signing documents under my name. I need to find out who's doing it. Nora looked at him for a long time as if weighing whether to enter another battle or to walk away like all the times before. Then she asked, Are you really ready to trust someone with no records, no credentials, no title? I don't need a degree, Cyrus replied, locking eyes with her. I need someone still sane enough to tell what's real and what's not. A few days later, at a small cafe near the hotel, they sat at a hidden corner table. Nora handed Cyrus a hand-drawn sketch, a map of the internal network devices inside the Bennett Global PR office. Internal equipment doesn't log IP addresses unless an external device connects, she explained. If you have the building's access logs, I can pinpoint which machine was used to access your digital signature system. You're sure you can do this? Nora took a sip of tea. If I still remember how to read timestamps and compute routing paths, then yes. You're not going to ask me what I'll give you in return? I don't want money. Then what do you want? She looked at him, and for the first time her gaze softened. I want the truth not to be buried again. Even if this time, it buries me instead. The penthouse was eerily quiet. Soft yellow light painted the wooden floor like a thin coat of varnish, still enough that every tick of the clock could be heard. Cyrus Bennett sat on the sofa, holding a strange phone he had just discovered hidden in a drawer behind a painting in Elise's room. No passcode. The fingerprint unlocked it instantly. That only made Cyrus more suspicious. Elise never left anything unsecured. He turned it on. The interface was simple. No social media apps. But inside a hidden folder named Fitness Logs were files that had nothing to do with exercise. Audio recordings, images of financial documents, and one folder titled Phase 3 Takeover. Cyrus opened the first recording. Elise's voice came through, crystal clear. He doesn't suspect a thing. Just leave the glass near his laptop. Daniel won't check it. A low male laugh followed. A voice Cyrus recognized, faintly board member Harlan Vexley. As long as he's out for a few hours, we'll have enough time to sign the transfers. By the time he wakes up, it'll be done. I'll announce the engagement after that. The media will handle the rest. A billionaire loses consciousness for a few hours at a public event, and the loyal fiancé steps in to take charge. No one will question it. Cyrus sat frozen. His heart pounded, but his eyes remained icy cold. They had planned to drug him. They knew exactly when he would arrive, which glass he would reach for, how he would react under media scrutiny, and how Elise would earn public sympathy if he were deemed overstressed. He played the second recording. Cyrus's shares will be restructured under temporary executive authority. The board has voting rights if he's absent for health reasons. The clause was amended last quarter. He signed it without reading. Elise's voice again. Cyrus clenched the phone in his hand. He had signed the trap himself. The next morning, at a small cafe in the Bronx, Cyrus placed the phone on the table in front of Nora. She looked at it, didn't ask why he had it, only asked, What do you want me to do? Extract everything, back it up, encrypt it, and be ready to release it if needed. I want to keep it like a bomb, and I'm the one holding the trigger. Nora nodded, pulling an old laptop from her canvas bag. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, eyes unblinking. High-quality recordings, voice-filtered, processed using software once exclusive to federal investigations. Elise had access to that, so she's not working alone. Cyrus sat across from her, hands clasped. What about the man's voice? Nora launched a voice-matching program. After a few seconds, the screen displayed a waveform and match result. She glanced at him. Harlan Vexley, Gusapsil Piosintu Meiti. Cyrus gave a small nod. I figured. Nora continued, scrolling down to messages stored in temporary cache. Elise, I have the draft to amend shareholder rules. Once he's deemed unfit to lead, I'll propose a restructuring. Harlan, good. Then we'll remove Bennett from his own company. Silence fell. Nora looked up at Cyrus. You okay? No, he answered honestly. But at least now I know I'm not crazy. What will you do? Stay quiet until the right moment. That night, back at Bennett Global headquarters, Cyrus pretended to attend a strategy meeting with the investment team. Elise arrived late, smiling as usual, acting like nothing was amiss. He looked at her, suddenly seeing someone unfamiliar, not because she had changed, but because now he could see what lay beneath. As they stepped into the elevator together, Elise turned and smiled. "Thanks for not skipping the meeting. I thought you were still mad about the photo shoot." "It's fine," Cyrus replied. "I just needed some time to understand who I can really trust." Elise blinked, tilting her head. "And? Have you figured it out yet?" Cyrus gave a faint smile. "Still working on it, but I'm getting better." Late that night, Cyrus stood alone on the 42nd floor balcony. The wind whipped against his face, but he didn't shiver. Elise had once seemed like the logical choice, smart, strategic, a master of media. He thought that was enough to call someone a life partner. He had been wrong. She never loved him. She loved what he could give her: status, power, influence. And when love couldn't get her there, she chose to take it by force. Back at the cafe, Nora handed him a small USB drive. Backup copy includes audio, images, IP logs, and supporting evidence. "Thank you. No need to thank me. I did it for the truth and for the people who've been ruined for trusting the wrong ones." "So, can I trust you now?" Cyrus asked. Nora looked at him for a long moment. "Number, but at least I don't put poison in orange juice." The bar on 38th West was dim and quiet, just dark enough for no one to notice anyone else. Nora rarely came to places like this. She wasn't here for the drinks or the atmosphere. She was here because someone had left a note in her cleaning supply drawer at the Halbert Hotel. Just one line. "Still breathing, Reyes?" No full name, no contact number, just a scrawled message in rough handwriting that had sent a chill down her spine all afternoon. Only one person had ever called her that. Keith Madsen, a former colleague from the Manhattan Internal Affairs Bureau, and the only one who knew the full story from 5 years ago. When Nora walked into the bar, he was already there, crumpled shirt, cheap whiskey in hand, eyes tired but instantly recognizing her. "You're still breathing. That's good," Keith said with a crooked smirk. Nora didn't sit right away. She just looked at him, as if needing to confirm he wasn't a ghost. "What do you want?" "I'm not looking for anything. Just saw your name on the Halbert's outsourced staffing list. I still have someone in the system." Keith took a sip. "Figured you'd left the continent by now." Nora finally sat down across from him, keeping her distance. Her voice was low, cold. "This should have stayed buried." "Your buried truth is why people are still dying, Reyes." Keith leaned on the table, eyes sharp now. "I'm not here to blackmail you. I'm here to remind you the one who ruined your life is still breathing too. And from the looks of it, they're involved in something bigger." 5 years ago, Nora Reyes was an internal investigator. Smart, relentless, unshakable, a woman immune to bribes and office flattery. That's why she was the first to uncover documents tied to a case of abuse during a misconduct inquiry. The victim, a 24-year-old new employee. The accused, Senator Aldridge, rising star of the party, closely tied to major financial backers. One of them? Bennett Global. Nora found internal surveillance footage, an original unsubmitted complaint, and threatening emails from senior security sent to the whistleblower. "You know what your biggest mistake was?" Keith asked, eyes never leaving her. "Not staying silent. Number, believing the system would protect those who tell the truth." Nora sighed, staring into her glass of ice water. "They set me up, edited footage, accused me of forging evidence. A week later, I was suspended. 2 weeks after that, someone tried to run my car off the Brooklyn Bridge." "And you vanished," Keith said. "I got reassigned to traffic cases, from investigator to parking ticket guy." Cyrus arrived just then. He walked into the bar like a cold gust of wind, eyes hard as steel as he spotted Nora and Keith at the table. He didn't speak, just stood there, as if assessing who the man was, and why Nora's fingers trembled slightly against her glass. Nora saw him. Her gaze paused. Keith turned, noticed Cyrus, and gave a low whistle. "Oh, this guy looks familiar. Bennett, right?" Cyrus Bennett, Cyrus replied, stepping closer, voice sharp. And you are? Keith, the last person to see Nora Reyes walk out with the Aldridge case file. Cyrus looked at Nora. For the first time, he saw shame in her, not from guilt, but from surviving something no one ever let her speak of. He's still there, Keith said, voice dropping. Aldridge, now senior advisor to Bennett Global's Renewable Energy Fund. Cyrus stiffened. What? You heard me, and he was a campaign donor for Elise Monroe. Ring a bell? Nora sat frozen. She didn't speak, just stared at the table, her distorted reflection warped in the rough wood grain. It had started to rain outside. Cyrus left the bar first without a word. Nora followed a few steps behind, then finally caught up. On the sidewalk, under the hazy yellow glow of the street lamp, he turned to face her. You nearly died for telling the truth. I did, Nora replied, and that's how I learned something. Truth doesn't always save. Sometimes it kills the one holding it first. But you still saved me that day. Because you're not Aldridge, she said quietly. You still know how to doubt. They stood in the rain, no umbrella, no movement. But for the first time, Cyrus didn't look at Nora like a mystery. He saw her as a survivor, a warrior with scars not on the skin, but in trust. Still following the story? If this story found you outside of Soul Stories, we invite you home, to where every touching tale begins with truth, hope, and heart. Halberd Hotel, Grand Sapphire Ballroom, the iconic venue once known for lavish charity auctions and million-dollar weddings, was now meticulously staged for the most anticipated event in the investment world, the engagement announcement of Cyrus Bennett and Elise Monroe. Media outlets lined the entrance early. Cameras flashed non-stop as guests walked the red carpet, CEOs, investors, political advisors, and celebrities. Everyone awaited the golden moment, a perfectly staged proposal, the fairy tale of the ultra-elite. But Cyrus Bennett hadn't come to tell a fairy tale. Inside the ballroom, Elise Monroe stood radiant in an emerald evening gown with a square neckline that framed her bare shoulders. Her makeup was flawless, goddess-like. She smiled gracefully as cameras panned to her, her hand gripping a ring box tightly. But that ring wouldn't be open tonight. At exactly 7 p.m., the MC took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we gather not only to celebrate the union of two of the most powerful figures in finance, but to witness a promise that love and trust will be the foundation of Bennett Global's future. Applause erupted. Elise stepped forward, glowing, waving confidently. Moments later, Cyrus entered in a classic black tuxedo, slim black tie, his face emotionless as stone. He walked to the podium and took the mic, a small nod to Elise. She returned it with expectant eyes, but he didn't kneel. He didn't open the box. Instead, he pulled a small USB drive from his inner pocket. Before we share our happy news, Cyrus said, voice low and steady, I want to play a short recording. To ensure everyone here knows exactly who I was about to marry. The room hushed. Elise froze. Her smile remained, but her eyes blinked hard. Lights dimmed. The giant LED screen lit up behind them. The audio began to play. He doesn't suspect a thing. Just leave the glass near his laptop, Daniel won't check. As long as he's out for a few hours, we'll have time to sign the transfer. I'll announce the engagement after. A wife taking charge when her fiancé loses control? Everyone will believe it. The voice unmistakably Elise Monroe. A wave of whispers, gasps, and stunned silence rippled through the room. Once he's out, I'll propose the shareholder restructure. Control will shift to me. My name will make headlines not for beauty, but for vision. Cyrus set the mic aside and walked toward Elise. He didn't look at her with hate, but with the quiet devastation of someone forced to stare directly at the deepest betrayal of his life, and still choosing to stand tall. Elise Monroe, he said calmly, you don't need to propose to me, because I will not marry someone who tried to poison me, forged my signature, and manipulated the company my parents built. Cyrus! Elise's voice shook. What are you doing? This is a celebration. This is a trial, and tonight's spotlight is an interrogation lamp. The legal team stepped forward. Undercover officers entered the room. "One of the key witnesses verifying the recording's authenticity," Cyrus said, "is standing backstage. Her name is Nora Reyes, and she was once buried by this system for telling the truth." Elise's eyes darted around, panic-stricken. Nora emerged from the shadows. In her janitor's uniform, she was unremarkable, but that made her all the more unexpected. "You dare!" Elise hissed. "Not me," Nora replied evenly. "The truth dares." Elise was handcuffed. As she was led away, she turned for one last glance at Cyrus, not as a betrayed woman, but a bitter loser. "You have no idea what you've just destroyed, Cyrus." "No," he said quietly. "I know exactly what I just saved." The ballroom remained dead silent. Cyrus returned to the podium, looking out at the faces that once praised Elise, doubted him, and celebrated this spectacle as if it were the romance of the year. "My engagement is canceled," he declared, "but my integrity is not. And this company, though briefly hijacked, will stand. Because I choose truth, not pretty dresses and poetic speeches." The media exploded. The headline broke that night. CEO Bennett cancels engagement, exposes internal plot live. On-stage fiancé arrested on site. Stocks fluctuated wildly. Investors split into factions. But the shrewd ones knew Cyrus Bennett hadn't lost control. He had just taken it back. That night, Cyrus returned home late. He didn't turn on the lights. The penthouse was dark and empty. No wedding flowers, no champagne, no music meant for a dazzling ceremony. He stood silently at the window, staring at the city lights. One hand held a glass of wine, the other dialed a number. The line picked up. "Hello?" Nora's voice, soft but clear. "Thank you," Cyrus said, "for reminding me that the spotlight belongs to those who don't fear the dark." The truth had been revealed, but it came at the price of the complete collapse of what Cyrus was no longer just a CEO running a company. He was a man who stood before hundreds and spoke aloud the words every billionaire fears. "I was betrayed, but I won't stay silent." And the one who made that possible wasn't a lawyer, wasn't a board member, but a woman holding a mop. 1 week after the canceled engagement ceremony, Bennett Global's offices were still far from settled. News of Elise Monroe's arrest continued to dominate headlines and trend across social media. Criticism, support, and even threats poured towards Cyrus Bennett from all sides. But to Cyrus, all those voices were nothing more than distant echoes. What he couldn't ignore was the silence. Nora Reyes was gone. No goodbye, no warning, no phone, no email, no forwarding address. She simply wasn't at the Halberd Hotel anymore. He discovered it one morning when he returned to the service floor, carrying a bag of coffee and 2 croissants, something he'd never imagined himself doing for anyone a week ago. Linda, the head of housekeeping, shook her head when she saw him. "That girl? She quit. No reason given. Just left an envelope in her locker." His name was written on the envelope. Cyrus, handwritten in neat, firm letters. He stood in the small break room, opened the letter. Inside was a plain sheet of paper, no perfume, no markings, just a few short lines. "I don't belong in your world, but I hope you'll live truthfully without needing anyone to polish your image. You survived a scheme. Now you get to start over your way. Thank you for trusting me, even just a little." Cyrus's hand clenched. The paper was light, but as he folded it and slid it into his pocket, his chest felt impossibly heavy. He was used to people coming and going. In his world, every relationship had terms, contracts, conditions, gains. But Nora was different. She asked for nothing, demanded nothing, left no number, and now left no trace. That afternoon, Cyrus walked into the executive boardroom where the leadership team was arguing over who should replace Elise in media operations. He said nothing, just stood silently for a moment, then turned and walked out. The room fell quiet in his wake. For him, the things that once seemed important now felt strangely hollow. That evening, he returned to his apartment. Luxury everywhere. Nothing missing except presence. No woman brushing her hair by the mirror. No sharp gaze challenging his every word. No quiet voice whispering thoughts that left him stunned. Only soft jazz played from the speakers. A bottle of wine sat unopened on the table. Cyrus sat down, staring into a crystal glass. I don't belong in your world. No, Nora. You were the piece my world was missing. The next day, Daniel arrived. We couldn't find her, he said, handing over a slim file. No plane tickets, no train bookings. But a camera at a bus terminal in North Manhattan caught someone who looked like her. She was walking, backpack, dark coat, heading toward the suburbs. GPS, Cyrus asked. Number, but I get the feeling she didn't want to be found. Cyrus gave a faint smile. Then you're mistaken. She didn't want to be tracked, but she wanted to be understood. That's not the same thing. 3 days after Nora vanished, Cyrus returned to the service room at the Halberd, the same room where she first told him not to drink the orange juice. He sat on the old wooden chair in the corner, where her cleaning cloth still lay, untouched. And for the first time in years, he didn't want to be a CEO, didn't want to dominate, didn't want to win. He just wanted to ask, why did you leave right when I started to need you? Meanwhile, in a small coastal town in northern New York, Nora walked along a quiet stretch of sand. Her hair blew in the wind, eyes distant. In her hand, she held a worn notebook. Inside it, she wrote, I used to think that when the truth came out, I'd feel free. But I don't. I just feel empty. Turns out I was never afraid of being buried. I was afraid there'd be nowhere left to return to. But maybe I'll build a place of my own, one piece at a time. The Monday morning board meeting at Bennett Global unfolded in an unusual hush. Cyrus Bennett, once a man who entered meetings like a general on the battlefield, untouchable, unshakable, wore a simple gray shirt, tie loosened, his eyes noticeably softer than before. As the board members settled in, Mr. Jerome, chairman of the executive committee, spoke up. We're here to vote on the reappointment of the CEO for the upcoming term. Mr. Bennett, would you like to make a statement before we proceed? Cyrus stood. No papers, no scripted speech, just a steady gaze and a calm, resolute voice. I decline reappointment. The room trembled in stunned silence. Bennett Global doesn't need me to survive, he continued, but I need to step away to live truthfully. 1 week later, Cyrus drove along the northern coast of New York, past quiet towns never marked on any investment map. The ocean wind carried the scent of salt and drying kelp, slowing everything down, softening it. At an old roadside gas station, he asked the shopkeeper about a new community center, one where a woman named Nora was rumored to be working. She helps battered women find shelter, the man replied. Every morning, she walks with the kids along the beach, picking up trash. Then she cooks for the old-timers. She's not from around here, but everyone respects her. Cyrus nodded. I need to see her. Won't be easy, the man said, pouring coffee. She only sees those who need help, not the ones who've done harm. That afternoon, he found the place. A 2-story white wooden house with a faded sign hanging above the door. Hollow Harbor Haven, where no one is left behind. He didn't go in right away, just sat in the car, watching through a half-open upstairs window where a few tiny orchid pots rested on the sill. Then he saw her. Nora Reyes, wearing a gray wool cardigan, hair tied back, softly smiling as she bent down to tie a little girl's shoelace. She stood again, looking out toward the sea. No makeup, no spotlight. But Cyrus knew. This was the first time he had truly seen her living. That evening, he stepped inside. The door was open, but no one manned a desk. There was no receptionist, only the smell of warm soup, toasted bread, and the sound of women laughing over a card game, women who once carried bruises now playing freely. He stood still for a while. Then Nora appeared at the end of the hallway. She stopped when she saw him. No smile, no surprise, as if she already knew he would come. What are you looking for here? She asked, voice calm. Not power, Cyrus replied. Not equity. Then what? He was silent. After a moment, he said, for someone who once saved me, and who I never got to tell that I'd never trusted anyone until her. Nora said nothing. She turned, motioning for him to follow. They walked to the beach behind the center, where moonlight stretched across the damp sand. You left the company? She asked. Yes. For me? For a chance to live honestly, just like you told me to. Nora let out a soft laugh. Not sarcastic, but the laugh of someone who once stopped hoping and now had to relearn how to believe. You know, she said slowly, for years I told myself, if someone needs me, I'll help. But I don't get to need anyone. And now? She looked at him for a long time. Now, I think maybe I get to choose someone, not because they saved me, but because I want to believe in them. The breeze swept across the sand. They didn't hug, didn't kiss. No tears were shed. Just two people once betrayed by the world, now standing beside each other. No contracts and no promises, only presence. The next day, Cyrus moved into a small cabin near the center. No one knew he was a billionaire. To them, he was the tall guy who brings soup every evening and the computer guy fixing the old security system. Nora was still the same head of the kitchen, speaking little, working hard, but every time their eyes met, amid the laughter of children or the chatter of women, there was a quiet space between them, and it was real. The kitchen at Hollow Harbor Haven had no dishwasher, no industrial systems, no trained chefs, just quiet hands and the sound of running water each evening, as the day wound down and a humble dinner was laid out on the long wooden table in the dining room. Cyrus Bennett, once the CEO of one of America's most powerful corporations, now stood at the sink, sleeves rolled up, apron tied around his waist, carefully scrubbing each plate under warm water. He didn't speak much, didn't ask for anything. Each morning he cleaned rooms. Each evening he wiped tables. At night he sat quietly in a corner, reading stories to children who'd woken from nightmares. No one asked where he came from. No one mentioned his name on headlines. Here everyone had a real name, and one they had once been wrongly called. Nora let him stay, but not too close. She wasn't cold, but there was still a distance between them, as if a thin pane of glass remained, fragile and yet unbroken. She saw him mop the floors every morning, heard him revise the center's donation plan, knew he had quietly paid last month's electricity bill under the name of an anonymous fund, but she didn't let him in. Not because she wasn't moved, because she was afraid to lose again. One night, rain poured hard. The entire center lost power. Nora led the children into the common room with flashlights, lighting candles. Cyrus went to fix the circuit breakers. When the lights returned, a scream rang out downstairs. Lana, a woman once battered by her husband, had seen his face on a campaign ad for mayor. She collapsed, shaking. Cyrus didn't approach. He stood back, letting Nora go to her first. Only after she had calmed the woman did he step in quietly, handing over a warm towel and clearing the photo off the table. When the room was still again, Nora turned to him. Her face was tired, but her eyes were deeper, steadier than ever. You never asked why we're afraid, she said quietly. I don't need to, Cyrus replied. I only need to know where you want me to stand and when to step back. Days later, they visited the empty land behind the center where Nora hoped to build a small classroom. It was cold, the ground muddy. Cyrus's shoes were caked in wet dirt, his slacks soaked at the hem. He didn't complain. He was crouched measuring the property lines when Nora finally spoke. I used to think, if I were strong enough, I wouldn't need anyone to save me. He looked up, waiting. But sometimes, what we need most isn't someone to rescue us. It's someone patient enough to stand beside us while we crawl out ourselves. He nodded slowly. I didn't come to save you, Nora, he said softly. I came to ask for forgiveness, if you're willing. Silence, only the waves in the distance and wind rattling the old tin roof nearby. Nora looked at him. Her eyes brimmed, but tears didn't fall. It wasn't weakness. It was the kind of emotion only those who've endured too long feel when they realize maybe, just maybe, they're finally seen. You know, she said, voice hoarse, I used to think, if I died on the Brooklyn Bridge that year, it might have been easier. Cyrus's hand clenched slightly. But the morning after, in the hospital, I found a nurse had left me a small note. Just one sentence. Life doesn't begin when you forgive others. It begins when you forgive yourself. Cyrus nodded gently. And have you forgiven yourself? Nora stared at him for a long time. Maybe, she whispered. Almost. That night, Cyrus didn't go back to his cabin. He stayed late, scrubbing burned pots, taking out trash. When he stepped out back, Nora was on the rear steps of the center. In her hands, 2 mugs of hot cocoa. She handed him one. No words. They sat beside each other, staring into the Black Sea, waves crashing with no rhythm, much like how they had met. Cyrus spoke, voice slow. I used to think if I were rich enough, strong enough, famous enough, no one could ever hurt me again. But I was wrong. Because pain doesn't come from weakness, Nora murmured. It comes from those we once trusted. He turned to look at her. And this time there was no wall between them. You don't have to fully trust me, he said. Just enough to give me a place. Not in your life. Just in the days when you feel like you don't belong anywhere. Nora placed her hand over his. Not firm, not absolute, but enough for him to know. She wasn't standing alone anymore. Winter arrived early in Hollow Harbor. By morning, a thin film of frost had already crept over the center's windows. In the activity room, a few children remained curled under blankets, while Nora quietly brewed coffee, her movements steady, unhurried, silent. But inside, she was anything but calm. On the table sat a thick envelope from New York, sealed with the stamp of an independent legal firm. Printed clearly across the front internal case file, Nora Reyes, petition for restoration of honor. It had all started with a detail buried in Elise's phone. While extracting data to expose the plot to seize control of Bennett Global, Nora and Cyrus had stumbled upon an old email with the subject, Aldridge, keep the Reyes case quiet. It was the missing piece. A draft of a threatening letter from Senator Aldridge's legal advisor addressed to the Manhattan Internal Affairs Bureau. The message laid it out clearly. If they wished to continue receiving funding for public projects, they were to eliminate Nora Reyes, who at the time had been investigating a misconduct case tied directly to Aldridge. Cyrus hadn't stood still. He reached out to Keith Madsen, Nora's former colleague, the one who had tried to warn her but failed. With Keith's help, he hired a team of independent lawyers and investigative journalists from the Veritas Ledger, a publication renowned for uncovering stories buried by power. After nearly a month of digging, cross-checking old files, and running voice analysis on audio clips, they compiled a full report proving that Nora hadn't fabricated evidence, as once claimed. She had been silenced. Then the story broke. Front page of the Veritas Ledger. Framed, the truth behind Nora Reyes in the abuse case, buried for 5 years. Millions of shares, advocacy groups rallied. A public outcry erupted against the institutions that had buried her truth. An official review hearing was scheduled. Cyrus went with her. No longer a CEO, no entourage, just a man in a thick coat, sitting beside her in a room filled with the very people who once signed her suspension. Nora said little. She read just 3 lines from her statement. I don't need an apology. I just want my name back. Not unstable employee, not internal disruption, but Nora Reyes, an honest investigator who refused to be silent in the face of injustice. Weeks later, the verdict came. Upon review of new evidence, the Office of Internal Affairs hereby nullifies the suspension order issued in 2020 against Nora Reyes. Her record is restored. She is found to have been a lawful whistleblower, wrongfully retaliated against. Cyrus received the news while dusting shelves in the center's storage room. He stood still when Nora walked in, letter in hand. Her eyes were red but dry. You won, he said softly. Nora shook her head. Number, I didn't win. I just didn't lose again. That night, the center held a small celebration. No wine, no fireworks, just sandwiches, hot coffee, and warm, humble words. A young woman who'd once been forced into marriage stood and raised her cup. To Nora, who told the truth, lived the truth, and stayed when everyone else walked away. Later that evening, Nora and Cyrus stood on the beach, the same one where they had once spoken without facing each other. She handed him a new ID card. Nora Reyes, investigative agent, reinstated. He looked at it for a long time. Are you going back to the job? He asked. No, she smiled. I don't need the badge anymore. I just need to know that the name I once carried is no longer hidden. Cyrus looked at her, voice low. I wonder, if I hadn't helped, would you have done it alone? I would have, she said, nodding. But not this soon. And probably not with this much peace. He didn't say more. He simply took her hand. And for the first time, there were no glass walls between them. No old files, no questions about guilt or identity. Just a man who once stood at the top of power. And a woman once buried by it, now standing side by side, not to prove anything, but to remind each other, truth can still win. You're watching Soul Stories, exclusive to our channel. If you're still with us, drop a comment. We read and cherish them all. Subscribe to support more heartfelt, original stories. Thanks for being part of the Soul Stories family. New York City, late March. The Wexler Tower Conference Center glowed brightly under the banner of a very different kind of evening, Justice Reimagined, a second look at truth. The event was hosted by a newly founded nonprofit, the Reyes Foundation, funded by Cyrus Bennett, though his name was nowhere on the board. He wasn't here to lead. He was here to open doors, to hold the light, to step back so others could finally step forward. More than 200 guests filled the auditorium. Lawyers, investigative students, human rights advocates, and survivors, those once silenced, betrayed, or erased by the system. On stage, Cyrus Bennett stepped up first. There were no grand visuals, no flashy introductions, just a white spotlight and a microphone. Good evening, he began, voice calm and steady. I used to believe justice could be bought with the right lawyers and the cleanest reports. Then I was betrayed by the woman I was supposed to marry, and saved by someone the world had erased. He paused. She no longer holds a badge. No title follows her name. But she taught me this. Truth doesn't need a microphone. It only needs one person brave enough to speak before it's too late. Silence filled the room. And now, that person will speak for herself. Nora stepped onto the stage. She wore a simple white blouse, a gray coat down to her knees, her hair tied back. No makeup, no shimmer. But there was something in her eyes that made the entire audience sit straighter, a presence that needed no preamble. She glanced across the room, pausing just slightly as her eyes found Cyrus in the front row. He nodded once. She smiled, truly smiled, for the first time without armor. Then she took the mic. Good evening, my name is Nora Reyes. I was once an internal investigator for the Manhattan PD. I was suspended, slandered, set up, and forgotten. Stillness. But first, I'm a human being. Like all of you, I've been afraid. I've made mistakes. I've stayed silent not because I agreed, but because I was too tired to fight. But I'm still here. She stepped forward. We don't have to be perfect to speak up. We just have to stop being silent forever. The applause started softly, then thundered. Cyrus watched her. His heart beat faster, not from fear, but because for the first time, he saw Nora fully herself, unbowed, unhidden, unapologetically whole. And for the first time, he didn't want to stay in the shadows anymore. When she stepped down from the stage, the crowd instinctively made way. Amid camera flashes, applause, and clicking lenses, Cyrus approached. He didn't speak. He simply extended his hand. Nora looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Then she placed her hand in his. Not for show, not for a photo op, but a soft, sure grip, one that didn't need words to be understood. The press captured that moment. No one asked what they were to each other. No one tried to label it the beautiful love story between a CEO and a disgraced investigator. Because they were no longer names or roles. They were two people who had lost everything and found each other in the wreckage, now walking forward together. Late that night, long after the event, Nora and Cyrus sat in the center's old van, parked near the Brooklyn Bridge, where once Nora had nearly let go of her life. She stared out at the distant city lights, hands still resting in his. I used to think that if I ever stepped back into the light, she said softly, I'd be terrified, afraid to be seen, afraid of what people would want from me, afraid I'd lose myself again. And now, he asked gently. She turned to him, her eyes glowing under the soft streetlight. Now, I feel light, because this time, I'm not walking back alone. Hollow Harbor Center was quiet at night. Only the ticking of the wall clock in the activity room and the dim yellow glow from the kitchen stretched down the long oak hallway. A light rain tapped on the tin roof like steady sighs from a place that had seen too much pain and was slowly learning to heal. Cyrus woke with a jolt. His shirt was soaked with sweat, his hand gripping the edge of the blanket. His breath was shallow, eyes wide open in the dark, as if he'd just returned from a corner of memory no one should touch. The blinding lights of a conference hall, the cold click of handcuffs closing around Elise's wrists, and the terrified realization that he had nearly been manipulated by the woman he once called fiancée. He sat up, hand to his forehead. No words came out, just a silence that ran deep. Nora had been standing in the doorway for some time. She didn't ask anything, didn't rush to him, didn't pretend to understand. She simply walked over, sat down beside him, and gently took his hand. Not tightly, not pulling him closer. Just there. "I don't need a perfect man," she whispered. "I need someone who's not afraid to cry." Cyrus turned to look at her. His eyes were red and glassy, but no tears had fallen. That look, raw and still, was the look of a man who had long forbidden himself to appear weak. "I don't need someone to save me," he said, voice shaking. "I need you." And for the first time, Cyrus cried. Not like a broken man, but like a child finally allowing himself to be held after the nightmare returned. Nora wrapped her arms around him, saying nothing more. She didn't try to soothe him, didn't reach for comforting words. She simply held him like a whisper made of warmth. "You're not alone." Because for the first time, the man who once ruled an empire, who had hidden his feelings behind 100 masks, had let his heart be bare and be seen. The next morning, as sunlight spilled through the western window, Cyrus stepped out of the small room at the back of the center, still holding Nora's hand. She looked at him and asked softly, "Did you sleep okay?" He smiled a smile light as morning air. "For the first time in years, I didn't dream about someone betraying me." 1 year later, the skies over Hollow Harbor were clear, a rare blue stretched above the horizon. Thin clouds drifted lazily, and the breeze carried scents of fresh grass, a hint of cinnamon from the warm kitchen, and the laughter of children coloring in the backyard. A year had passed since Cyrus Bennett walked away from the empire that bore his name. A year since Nora Reyes stepped out from the shadows of false accusations, reclaiming the name that was always hers. Now they lived in a small wooden house between the center and the sea. No air conditioning, no luxury cars, no staff or security, just a bougainvillea vine trailing over the porch, a lazy tabby cat soaking up the sun, and an old wooden table that always held 2 cups. That morning, Nora walked into the kitchen holding a glass of orange juice. Cyrus looked up from his book when he saw her. His eyes landed on the glass. A beat of silence. She set it down in front of him without a word. He looked at her and let out a soft chuckle. "You sure?" "I squeezed it by hand," Nora shrugged, half teasing. "Nothing in it but ice and trust." Cyrus lifted the glass, brought it to his nose, and inhaled deeply, then drank. The first sip lightly tart, fresh, clean. Nothing hidden inside, nothing to be wary of. Not like the orange juice from long ago served in crystal, at a table where a single sentence could cut like a knife. He set the glass down, looked her straight in the eye. "I trust you, and the world, because of you." Nora sat beside him. Their hands didn't need to find each other because they had never let go. Through the window they watched the backyard, where a group of women tended to plants, and a little girl held up a sign that read, "Today I feel safe." And among it all was a new life, not built with money, not painted with credentials, but nurtured with truth and trust reclaimed from the ruins.